Good evening and welcome to the Scanner Guys Live. I'm Jonathan Higgins, live in our Cincinnati studios. And we've got a really cool show coming up tonight. We are talking about using your scanner, but trying to get a little bit faster scanning speed. So we're going to give you tips and tricks on how to do that. And of course, improve your overall scanner experience. If you're just joining us for the first time to the show, welcome. We cover in the first half a slide deck where we cover the topic of the show, and then at the tail end of the show we'll answer any questions or comments that you may have had during the broadcast. And if you're a first-time viewer, make sure you hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up on the video, and definitely come back because we've got lots of things to cover on this channel. Let's cover a couple of slides before we get into the topic of discussion here. So here's tonight's broadcast, tips for faster scanning. So we hope to give you some tips to be able to get that scanner to move a little bit faster. As many of you know, these scanners move pretty quickly, with scanning, but we're going to teach you tips and tricks on how to do that as well. Make sure you follow, like, and subscribe to the Scanner Guys on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at the Scanner Guys. Make sure you check out the website as well, thescannerguyshow.com. Shop the website and also check out the Contact Us page. I try to get back to everybody as quickly as possible. Sometimes it takes me a little bit longer, so if you've emailed in, I'm sorry if I haven't got back to you right away. You can also sign up for our newsletter as well. We haven't sent one in a while, but I plan on doing a couple very soon, so definitely make sure you subscribe to the newsletter. Train Aficionado Live runs on the opposite Wednesdays of the Scanner Guys. The next Train Aficionado Live will be next Wednesday, August the 16th, 2023, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. And Train Aficionado is at Train Aficionado on YouTube. Our last show, we were talking about the Uniden Bearcat BCD 160DN and the BCD 260DN. Basically, we covered this from a point of view of a railfan. Everything a railfan needs to know about the two newest, latest scanners released. So if you missed that show, definitely check it out on Train Aficionado's YouTube channel. We also have some events coming up this fall. So definitely check early and often the Train Aficionado event page, trainaficionado.com/events. All right, let's get underway with tonight's tips for faster scanning. So sit back and relax as we cover this topic of discussion. The first thing we want to do is give you a roadmap of how to program a scanner. So many of you may be watching this show for the very first time and you're wondering, what do I need to do to be able to program my scanner? So here's the roadmap. Stop number one, we want to make sure you do research on radioreference.com. If you're not familiar with Radio Reference, that's basically the database that all the frequencies for police, fire, and EMS and other things such as railroads, aviation, pretty much it's a one-stop shop for people looking for frequencies. Kind of like the old back in the day, the police call books that used to come out once a year at Radio Shack. This is about the equivalent, but it's online and it's updated frequently. The next stop on the road trip, we want to make sure that you pick the right scanner for the job. So when you do your research on Radio Reference, you figure out, these people are digital, these people are using trunking, maybe some people are using DMR or Next Edge. So now you're kind of determining what scanner is needed. When you do purchase a scanner, you want to make sure that you check and update the scanner's firmware, or if it's a database scanner, you update that database to the latest and greatest. Stop number 4. You want to plan out the programming. You want to make sure that you're programming up the way you need it to be. And that's what tonight's topic of discussion is getting that scanner to scan a lot faster and planning out that programming. We're going to give you tips and tricks on how to be able to do that as well. And then the next step, number 5, is start creating those programming profiles using scanner software, such as Butel software, which is a proud partner of the Scanner Guys. So definitely check out Butel software. Just do a quick Google search and you'll be able to pull up their website. You can also purchase their software on Scanner Master's website as well. And step number 6, program that scanner and then check it out. Make sure once you have the scanner programmed, it is ready to go and it's working the way you want it. And of course, the great thing about programming it through software, you can always tweak the programming. You can always make changes. You're not starting all over from scratch again. All right, a little bit of a roadmap to programming a scanner. So let's go on to the next slide. So stationary scanning. What the heck do I mean about stationary scanning? That basically means that your scanner is going to be staying in one spot, whether it be in your office or at your house or, anywhere else that you monitor. Let's say if you're lucky enough to have a little cabin in the woods, and the scanner is staying there. It's basically the scanner is not moving about. It's a scanner that's in a fixed spot. So let's talk about some tips and tricks. So here's some tips for trunking scanning tips. Now, when you're programming your scanner, for example, the MARC system is a statewide trunk system here in Ohio. There are hundreds of towers in the state. I'm not too sure exactly how many, but there's a lot of them. You only want to program the sites that you're in range of. So let's say, for example, you're in Cincinnati. Where I'm located, I'm able to hear the Hamilton County tower, and I'm also able to hear the Butler County tower. So I'm able to hear 2 towers within range of where I'm at. So all the other towers that are around or across the state, I'm not going to be able to pick them up. I'm too far away. So typically what your scanner will do, especially on a Uniden radio, it's going to check every one of those towers. So if you programmed in the MARC system, it's going to program in all of the towers in that particular system. You want to basically narrow it down to a couple of towers. The reason being, it's going to be checking those sites for an active control channel. And it's going to go through and check every one of those, and it's going to slow down the scanning speed versus programming the tower or site, or sites that you're within range of. It's going to check 1 or 2 and then move on and then scan through anything else in the scanner. So you want to narrow that down, especially if you're programming something with the Uniden Sentinel software for the 436 or 536. Or the SDS 100, 200, or Home Patrol 1 or 2. If you're using that Sentinel software, let's say if I program in some talk groups for Cincinnati, of course it's going to pick the site that I'm going to be under, plus all the other sites when you're creating a favorites list. So once you have the favorites list created, you want to remove those other sites that you're not within range of. You want to just remove them. Because the thing is, it's going to try checking each one of those sites for reception. So that's very important. And then on radio reference, you're able to see on the trunking system, there'll be a column under each site where the county it's located. So that's definitely great to be able to narrow down what sites are nearest to you. So you'll see, frequencies, you'll see a site name and maybe a site number, and then you also see a county that it's in. That's going to be the super helpful thing to be able to say, okay, so these sites are in Hamilton County. Which one am I closest to? Typically, a county will have at least 1 or 2 sites. If it's an extremely large county, it could have multiple sites. So great tip, and this is for stationary scanning. So let's take a look at some more tips. Conventional scanning tips. Use the banks or scan lists or groups to separate out the programming. And you can also do this with trunking as well. So you can program a trunking system into a scanner multiple times with different talk groups in each bank, scan list, or group, depending on what type of model it is. When you separate this out, that means that you're only scanning the things that you have turned on. So you don't need to monitor everything all the time. You may want to, on a slow evening, be able to scan everything all the time. But the thing is if you want that scanner to scan a lot faster, what I would recommend doing is separating out the programming. Let's say, for instance, you wanted to monitor the city of Hamilton, but you don't want to monitor Fairfield, for example. Put Fairfield in its own scan list or group, and then you can turn that on when necessary. Same thing with Hamilton, the city of Hamilton, you can do that as well. Or you can run both at the same time. So separating out those things allow you to be able to narrow down what you're monitoring. So that's a great way to be able to kind of reduce down what you're scanning. And then be picky about it. The great thing about us programming the scanner yourself is you're deciding what exactly you want to monitor. You're picking and choosing what you're listening to. So definitely, go in there and if you're using radio reference to be able to do that, go in there and act like you're loading up a shopping cart. You're picking, certain channels that you want or certain talk groups. So you're picking and choosing those things and putting it in your shopping cart. Especially for one of these database scanners when you're creating a favorites list, you don't have to select every single talk group or every single conventional channel. You're going to select the ones that you want to be able to monitor. Here's some more tips for programming for that scanner at home or your office. You want to remove those sites out of range, which I mentioned already. You want to pick the talk groups you want to monitor. Keep in mind, if it's a statewide trunking system, many talk groups are only going to work under certain sites. If it's a statewide talk group, it may work on every tower or whenever that talk group is activated under that tower, depending on how the trunk system is set up. So definitely you want to be choosy on what you're programming in. Like for instance, for me, I'm here in Cincinnati. If I try programming a talk group that's in Cleveland, I'm likely not going to be able to hear it. It's not a talk group that's active under the sites that I'm monitoring. You want to create some other lists, such as an event list or our favorites list. So occasionally we have some crazy weather that rolls through, such as a tornado or a hurricane or, severe thunderstorm or a tropical depression, depending on where you're at, or even a snowstorm. Maybe you want to create some lists or favorites that are for events, such as, a weather event list. Maybe you're going to have the public works out there, the utility company, the emergency management, and maybe if the state has some special ops channels that you can monitor that activate during a weather-related event. You definitely want to create something like that. Another suggestion is doing a local event. For instance, if we did a local event, let's say, for example, when I was in Massachusetts, the New England Patriots games, they're in Foxborough, Massachusetts, and it's multiple agencies that partake in the detail every time there's a football game. So those agencies are using the same talk groups, maybe special ops or secondary or event channels. So those are great if there's a game night going on at the local football stadium or baseball stadium, and it's involving a lot of details, in this case, detail officers for traffic and for policing. Maybe they've got EMS or fire there just, on standby if anything goes wrong. And maybe they have some volunteers ushering people where they need to go throughout the stadium. So creating things like that. You may want to create favorites lists or scan lists that encompass those things. And these channels you don't want to run all the time because it's going to bog down the scanner. It's going to slow down the programming. So definitely you want to try to be able to do that. The other cool thing, which I'm going to cover in a slide coming up, you may want to split the programming in between multiple scanners. If you're lucky enough to have a couple of different scanners, you may want to do that as well. We have a whole slide which I'm going to talk about as we go through the slide deck. Try and improve the programming as you go. As I mentioned before to everybody, the programming is not written in stone. We're not doing this manually typically, where we're programming every single frequency in by the keypad. A lot of us are using programming software. You want to save that programming layout on your computer. And then you're able to review it. And then you're able to tweak it and edit it. So you may find that certain things work and certain things don't, but you keep improving upon the programming. So these are all tips that I would recommend. When you're programming, think outside of the box. Think of, maybe programming a weather list or a local events list. Because you know what? That could be interesting monitoring during those type of things. If you got a local event, program in those secondary channels, those ops channels, the event channels. I mean, there's some people, since I'm from Massachusetts, I can kind of relate to this. There's people that have scan lists or favorites lists set up for the Boston Marathon, for example. So they'll monitor all the towns along the marathon route. They'll program in on the other known frequencies that become active during that event. And that's something they'll probably do, a couple days before the marathon and then monitor it on marathon day. And basically that list will stay pretty much quiet until the next year. So that's something that we can do. The other thing, keep in mind with these radios, they have robust memories. If you got a 996, a large memory in there. If you've got, something like an SDS or a database type of scanner, you have unlimited ability pretty much to create as many favorites lists as you like. Those favorites lists are what we call text files. And that SD card is able to handle hundreds and hundreds of favorites lists because it's a small little file that's on there. So all good things to be able to keep in mind. Let's continue on. So here's what I was talking about earlier. Tips for favorites lists and scan lists when you're using multiple radios, for instance. So what you want to do is try to create smaller favorites lists or scan lists. Maybe you want to do regional dispatching for larger cities and towns. Maybe you want to split the police and fire channels into its own favorites list. Break out those smaller towns into individual lists. I mean, these are all things that you can keep in mind. So what you can do is you can program in on multiple radios. Let's say if you're blessed to have two 536s, as you can see here. So maybe you program both radios exactly the same with the same various favorites lists. So on one radio, you put in the police channels. On the other radio, you put in the fire channels. And then if you've got an event going on, let's say there's a fire going on and you want to follow it. So on one radio, you're able to follow Fireground 1, and now they're using Fireground 2. So what you can do is if you duplicate the programming on both radios, on one radio, you can monitor Fireground 1. The other radio, you can monitor Fireground 2. So you don't miss a beat during that incident. Or maybe you have one radio scanning the two Fireground channels and you're monitoring some sort of mutual aid channel, so you can hear that more mutual aids coming in from other towns. So use the assets that you have. In this case, if you do have multiple radios in your shack, kind of think of, one, how can I get the most bang for the buck with the radios that I have? And just splitting them out and maybe cloning that programming. So the programming, all the favorites lists are in radio 1 and radio 2, but you only are running a couple favorites lists on radio 1, and then you're running a different pair of favorites lists on radio 2. So it's kind of like alternating in between the favorites lists. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, put in those favorites lists or scan lists, those event channels. Maybe put that in both radios. The other cool thing when you're monitoring on two radios, take advantage of the alert light. If it's available, maybe putting in, all the police frequencies is blue. The red for the fire. Maybe for the highway departments, you do a green. Maybe you do a yellow for the railroads or aviation. Think of things that'll work for you. And then, of course, having that alert light, you're able to look at the radio. Oh, that was just a fire dispatch call. So if you caught the tail end of it. The other thing that we forget about is bringing life to an older scanner, such as, like let's say you got an older 15X kicking around. Maybe expand on your scanning monitoring. Maybe you monitor railroads or aviation or maritime radio channels, or even program some of those analog channels. The great thing about you got this radio sitting there, why don't you dabble in a little bit into something that you haven't scanned, such as one of those things. Railroads, aviation, maritime, maybe some business frequencies could be interesting. So definitely give new life to that analog radio or that radio that you're no longer using anymore. Let's say you have, a bunch of 536s or a 996 kicking around, but you've switched over to the SDS. And the SDS, of course, is the king of the castle with doing simulcast. Give new life to even those digital radios as well. So all types of good stuff there to keep in mind while you're scanning. So definitely, this is something to keep in mind, cloning programming, and then of course creating those favorites lists into smaller chunks, with breaking things out in smaller chunks so you basically can monitor maybe a particular part of Cincinnati versus all the talk groups for the city. Maybe you want to cover, this particular night if you're in Cincinnati, there's a game, the Reds game's going down in one of the districts. So you want to monitor just the talk group for the police dispatch that's there by the Red Stadium. You want to think about those things because it could be some interesting listening. You're kind of laser focusing on what you're monitoring. So why the cloning of programming? Because, it's a great thing to be able to do that if you have multiple radios. As I mentioned earlier, 2 firegrounds can be used. They could be in the same favorites list. So the great thing is lockdown on each channel, radio 1 and radio 2. Smaller towns, big events. Sometimes the police channel will be buzzing with activity and the fire channel will be buzzing with activity. So yet again, lockdown on the police channel on one radio, lockdown on the fire channel on the other. So it's great to be able to program these combinations in each radio. So you basically are able to monitor, these channels separated. Maybe they're a part of the same favorites list or scan list, but having to be able to have them in both radios allows you to be able to do that. When you're scanning in general, maybe you'll certainly have it off on one and on the other. But when those incidents happen, you enable that favorites list or scan list on the other radio and then lock down on those channels. So all good things there. Mobile scanning. We need to look at it from a different approach here. And there's going to be one common theme that I'm going to mention, which is a huge asset when it comes to the unit in radios, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. Trunking and conventional, you're probably going to be covering a large range of frequencies. So when you do make that favorites list or scan list, you may be including all of the sites or a handful of the sites that you're going to be touching on your travels. Let's say you're pretty much using the scanner in your vehicle and it's a part of, and you create a scan list or a favorites list for your commute to and from work. So maybe what you're going to do is program in the neighboring towns along that highway. And of course, the channels that are in the city or town that you work in. Now, the best thing to be able to do, and this is only on the unit in radios, is GPS scanning. So you're able to purchase a GPS receiver, which will then turn things on and off as you travel. So you remember back in the day when you were doing a road trip with a bank-driven scanner, of course you would program in all the frequencies for this state in bank 1 and the next state in bank 2 and so forth and so on. So what you ended up doing is you was like, okay, all the Massachusetts frequencies for the state police are in bank 1, and then all the upstate New York frequencies are in bank 2, and then all the, back in the day when Ohio was probably conventional, and so forth and so on as you make your trip across the country. But with GPS scanning, that all happens in the background. It's certainly the magic of GPS scanning. So how it all works is basically you have an antenna that's able to read the satellite, and it's giving your latitude and longitude of where you're located. And the scanner takes that information and determines where you're at, and then basically turns on things are on or off as you travel. As I'm probably going to mention a couple of times during this slideshow, database scanning tip. This is a huge one. Using a favorites list versus the full database. I strongly recommend using the favorites list. You're going to tune out other things that not monitoring. Best example, you're doing a trip, favorites list from home to work. And let's say you're traveling along the interstate. So maybe you don't want to monitor the local cities and towns along that interstate. So you put in the highway patrols that you're traveling through. Or maybe you want to monitor the highway patrol and the fire departments that are neighboring the highways. So you'll be able to hear fire department going to an accident. And of course, the state police or highway patrol responding to that on the road as well. So it allows you to, yet again, with the software, load up your supermarket cart with, these channels or talk groups that you want. In this case, the state police or highway patrol channels or talk groups, and maybe the fire department dispatches for the various cities or towns that run neighboring to that particular interstate. So having to customize that, doing a favorites list. If you're running a full database, it's going to pick up everything in its uncle, even though you're using GPS scanning. But other things, you may be hearing other agencies that you don't care to monitor. And of course, doing the GPS scanning is going to increase the scanning speed because it's focused on your location, where you're at. You want to make sure within the softwares that are available, you can actually adjust this geotagging data with center points and ranges. Especially if you're using the Butel software, you can customize these center points and ranges. For instance, when I was living in Attleboro, Massachusetts, I knew that the signal could go a lot further than what the latitude, longitude range that was listed on Radio Reference. So basically, I increased the range so I'll be able to hear that a little bit further as I was commuting into ScannerMaster. So those are all great things to be able to do. And of course, using the Sentinel software and of course the Butel software, you're able to customize that geotagging data through the software. A little bit more with understanding GPS scanning. It's essentially what you see here. So as the vehicle travels across the screen, it's going to be in range of certain towers. As it moves further right, it's going to be eventually in between this particular location and this particular location. So it'll keep turning things on and off as you travel. So consider if everybody was analog conventional and you were traveling through the state of Massachusetts, for example, or even digital conventional, figure each city or town has got a 5-mile radius or more, depending on how big the city or town is. And then as you're traveling, things turn on and off as you go. So as you enter into one city, that will turn on. Maybe you're still within a circle of the other city, so they overlap with one another. So you're still hearing the other city, and then as you travel further away, that particular city will turn off, and then maybe a new city will turn on as you approach that area. So things will keep turning on and off on its own. So you're not having to press anything on the scanner. This is almost literally like the hands-free feature, that people say for their smartphones. Everything's on the steering wheel, or maybe they're able to do voice command or whatever it may be. This is the scanner doing a hands-free type of thing. So GPS scanning is certainly a great thing. It's available on the Uniden radios, such as the 325P2, the 996P2, the 536, the 436, the SDS 100, 200, and of course the Home Patrol 1 and 2. So it's available on all of the current radios and some of the past edition radios as well. So you may be able to do that, but you have to purchase a GPS receiver. Basically, this is an antenna that allows the scanner to be able to see the satellite. The scanner is receiving latitude or longitude of where you're located. So that allows the scanner to be able to determine from that latitude, longitude, what to turn on, what to turn off as you travel. So this is with the mobile scanner. So these road trip tips apply here. Use a GPS receiver. This is only available, as I mentioned moments ago, on your Uniden scanners. And I can't believe it again, I'm mentioning again. Do some research on Radio Reference. You want to be able to do that as well. If you're doing some highway traveling, program in favorites list or scan list with the following. Maybe you want to do state police or highway patrols. And of course, maybe state public works channels. As I mentioned earlier, let's say you want to program in some of those neighboring fire departments, because a lot of times if there's an accident on the roadway, they're going to be responding with the state police to assist with that accident scene. Database scanning. Take the time for creating a favorites list. Take the time in doing that, because the nationwide database, a lot of times that will pull in way too much. And the other thing I can't stress enough with those database scanners, create a backup SD card. That time that you're hundreds of miles away from the house, that's going to be the time you have an SD card problem. Of course, you're not going to have your laptop relatively ready to be able to reformat that SD card on the fly and then getting it up and running. So what I recommend is having a spare SD card in the vehicle. That basically means, like Murphy's Law, if it's there, you won't need it, essentially. So definitely do that. And if you do have an SD card in the vehicle, keep it in a cool place, somewhere where it's not going to receive any issues or damages or get broken. When you are traveling, or when you're commuting into work, definitely program those destination stops, such as your workplace, or if you are doing a road trip, you program in those cities and towns that you're stopping in. Make it its own list, and GPS that, of course, so you're able to turn that list or scan list on and off if necessary. And the other thing, what I recommend, if you're traveling through a larger city and you notice that there's a lot of times the local police are patrolling, you may want to include the talk groups or channels along with the state police or highway patrol with the local police as well. Those are all great things. And another thing, maybe you're traveling on some county roads, so they're patrolled by the county sheriff. You may want to include those as well. So definitely what you want to do is you want to, one, of course, see what channels that are out there and ready to reference. And the next thing, you want to program the scanner accordingly. If you fine-tune that list, it's going to allow you to be able to scan exactly what's needed. You're not going crazy with, so many radio transmissions going on that don't pertain to what you want to monitor or focus on. And the other thing, too, the more you're scanning, the slower it's going to be. So fine-tune the list or the scan list or favorites list. Fine-tune it. So you're programming in exactly what you need and nothing more. Of course, if you want some additional frequencies or channels or talk groups, program them into their own favorites list and then turn those on. If you're like, I'm not hearing anything that's going on, let me monitor the truckers on the CB. So maybe you create a favorites list for that and be able to monitor those channels. That is our tips and tricks for faster scanning. So we covered that pretty quickly this evening. Got a few questions from our audience. So let's hop into those questions right now. We had Tim ask. He has the SDS 100 and the Whistler 1040. Can the 1040 do rail and air scanning? Yes. Absolutely. Rail and air can be done on the 1040. Think of, the railroad frequencies on the 160 megahertz. And then, you've got your aviation frequencies basically still in the VHF in a different portion of the band. So yes. And that's a great thing. Giving new purpose to a radio that's no longer your primary radio. In this case, maybe the 1040 is just sitting around. And you figure out, well, I'm going to use this for railroads or aviation. I mean, it's giving life to an older radio that you're no longer using. And many of us have like an old analog radio. And maybe, for me, living in Cincinnati, public safety is all digital. So I've given purpose to an analog radio because I'm into railroads. And of course, if I was into aviation, that'd be a great radio as well to do that as well. Quick keys. Can you explain how they work on an SDS? So quick keys, I'm probably going to butcher this some. We did do a show a couple years ago on quick keys. You may be able to take a look at that as well. But quick keys allow you to basically assign a particular favorites list to a quick key. You can do that. You do a couple of keystrokes and enables that particular favorites list. You can also do it on channels as well. So you basically hit this, this, and this will turn on, will go to that particular channel. So you can do that as well. So yes, the SDSs and many of the database scanners, if you're running full database, trust me, too much comes in. You want to run it on a favorites list. That's definitely the best way to do that. The other thing that you can do is you can filter out the agencies you're monitoring by the tags. So you can, if you're using full database, you can actually filter out, let's say you're not a fire buff. So you can turn off fire dispatch, fire talk around, and fire tac. You turn those off, full database is not going to enable those particular channels. So you have that ability with channel tagging to be able to turn things on and off on a database scanner. But if you really want the scanner to increase speed, especially on a unit in database scanner, I highly, highly recommend doing a favorites list. That's going to be your best way, because you look at it this way. As I mentioned during the slide deck, you're looking at the full radio reference database when you're in Sentinel software or using Butel, and you're selecting those talk groups or those particular conventional channels. You're not pulling in every single thing. James has got a question about, the New Jersey State Police going to Motorola P25. That doesn't mean that they're going to be encrypted. They may have capability of doing that, and if they choose to do so, they may use that. P25 doesn't automatically mean encryption. P25 is a digital format. I believe New Jersey, I'm trying to remember what they were on before. They probably were on a Motorola system with digital capabilities, and they may be moving to a phase 1 or phase 2 digital system. It's been a while since I looked at New Jersey, but basically it's going to indicate on radio reference whether or not they're using encryption. Typically it'll show with a trunk system, it's going to show a T, which means TDMA phase 2, or it'll show a D that indicates, phase 1 digital, or it will show a lowercase e or an uppercase e. An uppercase e means it's encrypted full time. A lowercase e means it's using encryption part of the time. So take a look on radio reference as they do updates. If you see e's, that means, either full encryption or part-time encryption, depending on what's going on. Yes, typically P25 systems are in the 800 megahertz and 700 megahertz, especially for public safety. Randy's asking about how about doing a show or shows diving into the FCC database. This is a great place to find those missing frequencies that are not listed on radio reference. Randy, excellent suggestion. We could probably take definitely a deep dive on that. I will definitely note that we're going to look at doing one of those shows so you can kind of see what the database looks like and also know what you're looking at. So that's definitely a great suggestion, Randy. Thank you so much for that. We'll definitely put that in the pile for upcoming shows. Appreciate that. But yeah, the database, the FCC database is great, especially if you're looking for conventional channels. You'll be able to see by public safety, you can do a search for a department like I used to do back in the day when I was living in Middleborough, Massachusetts. I would occasionally go to the FCC database and search out Middleborough, and of course it would show all the frequencies that are licensed by the town of Middleborough. So every so often I would see a new license pop up. So I kind of had an indication of, one, somebody's going to it, and I would take a little deeper dive into it. It would say who's licensed. Maybe it's a frequency that's going to be licensed to the fire department, to the police department, or maybe to the highway department or the electric company. So that ended up helping me to see that. And then the next thing, if I was able to get it before they got it online, I put it into the scanner. I programmed that frequency in there and then waited for activity to happen on that particular channel. Or, in that case, you may hear them testing on it, which is great. You're able to figure out, what the range is and kind of listen to that testing phase before the town switches over to it or the city. Same thing with another cool thing that you can do with trunk systems, which we've talked about many, many times, is with a trunk system, a lot of the talk groups are not listed on radio reference. So the great thing that you can do is rather than ID scan, you can do on the scanner what we call ID search, which allows you to be able to search for different talk groups. And you can use such as the Butel software that does virtual control and data logging. You may want to use the professional software. I recommend, if you're going to be doing more than just programming the scanner, I highly recommend doing the professional software, because you can connect the scanner up all day long or overnight, and then you'll see a list of those frequencies that are listed there, or talk groups in this case, and then you can kind of compare it up. Yep, that's an unknown talk group. That is an unknown talk group, and you can see how many hits it's gotten as well. So you may want to create a favorites list or a scan list with some of those unknown talk groups, and then listen to it and try to determine, oh, that's definitely a police department using it, or that's a fire department, or maybe a highway department, or EMS, or whatever it may be. You'll eventually figure out who it is. And then if they're mentioning any landmarks, that's going to help you narrow down where they are. So it's kind of like playing detective. All right, so let's take a look. Why do digital trunk systems have a delay when the scanner notices? It takes 3 seconds for the scanner before the police can be heard after the key up. So yeah, there is slight delays on the scanner, especially when it comes to digital. You can set up a delay on a particular channel. So for instance, let's say you're monitoring a conventional or talk group. On the scanner, you can set a delay so it'll stand by in that particular channel for response back. Or you can remove the delay, and basically as soon as the radio transmission is over with, the scanner will start scanning immediately. But the problem with that, if you don't have a delay, you may miss the radio transmission, coming back. Maybe the officer is calling the dispatcher responds. Maybe they don't respond in the first second. Maybe it takes them up to 3 seconds to reply back. So it takes them a bit. So definitely, you can set a delay on the scanner. Some trunk systems or talk groups will have a little bit of a carrier tone after. So when they key out, the repeater will stay connected for a second and then release. So that'll also happen as well. So we've got a lot of things that you can, of course, some things that are on the radio's end that are out of your control, and then there's other things that you can, adjust the delay. I mean, that's also going to slow or speed up the scanning speed as well. Because take, for instance, if you do have a delay on a particular channel or talk group, it's going to sit there for 3 seconds and then scan, for example. If you don't have a delay on there, it's going to stop on the radio transmission, and then bang, it's going to start scanning around again. So definitely, keep those things in mind. Jim's asking me about the BC160DN. Have I tried any different antennas on it? Yes, I have. Works very well with the Smiley antenna if you're doing railroads. Works well, on the rooftop antenna, because I've got my, actually on camera, finally, I've got the base mobile on camera. The BCD 260DN is on the rooftop antenna, works great. I'm monitoring on this particular radio, as many of you know. I'm monitoring the railroads. So that's the road channel for Norfolk Southern that comes north out of Cincinnati. That's actually the train crew communicating. I'm not too sure where they are on the line, but I can hear a lot of those radio transmissions on this particular radio. I'll turn up the volume for a few minutes so you guys may be able to hear some stuff from that particular radio. But as I was talking about in the slide deck, we're programming the vast majority of these radios with computers. We're able to tinker around with the programming. Don't be afraid to tinker around with the programming. the great thing about it is, you know, you're going to make improvements along the way. So you're not kind of set in stone. Back in the day, I had a couple of radios and I programmed them um, through software now, but back then I was programming it by the keypad. It took me a long time to be able to program the whole radio up. And then once I've programmed the radio, you know, it took me a bit to, you know, redo the programming. Like every so often, about every 6 months, I would basically reset the radio and then reprogram it again. You know, start with a clean slate, you know, reline up the frequencies where I want, maybe adjust the banks in the radio, or, you know, eliminate some channels that I felt that were unnecessary, or added some new ones. Andy's got a question. I'm wanting to connect multiple speakers around my apartment for my base station. What speakers would you recommend to go with? So, something that I would recommend is maybe using 352 axles. So that's a defect detector that's 10 miles air miles away from me. Just to give you a little bit of background on reception. So what I was saying before is what I've been doing is I have a little Bluetooth. Let me see if I can pull this up into camera view. I have this right here, this little Bluetooth dongle. So this actually connects up to the record jack on the back of my scanner. And then, of course, I have my power jack, which I have this plugged in all the time because I'd be killing the battery all the time on this. But basically what I've done is I put this Bluetooth transmitter on the back of my radio. And then I have Bluetooth speakers, or I have a portable Bluetooth speaker, I should say, that I'm able to bring from room to room. So that certainly helps. I mean, it's got pretty decent range. The other thing that you may be able to find, back in the day, there used to be, you know, these wireless speakers that you would have a left and right speaker. And if you wanted the scanner audio to be in both rooms, maybe you put the left speaker in one and the right speaker in the other. But the Bluetooth, I find, works really well, which I can show you. Back in the day, Scanner Master used to carry this little Anchor speaker right here, which works real. I got it upside down. There you go, the Anchor speaker. So this little speaker works really well. They don't manufacture it anymore, but I do have this larger Anchor speaker, which I use, and it's Bluetooth, and it's great. I mean, it's got basically the volume buttons on the top, the power button right here. It'll basically connect up to this. It recognizes this, and then I'll start to hear the audio on the speaker. So I typically, for me, I have one of these speakers, and, you know, of course, I'll bring it in the bedroom when I'm in there, or I'll bring it into the living room, and then keeping my base radio exactly where it is, and the audio is great. So if you've got a base mobile with a record jack, I recommend connecting up to that, because when you're in your room, you're able to adjust that volume up or down on the radio like this. And then when I want to monitor it on the Bluetooth speaker, I turn the volume all the way down, and then that record jack is independent from the speaker jack on the scanner. So if I turn the volume up or down on the scanner, it's not going to affect that record jack, because it's a steady volume on that record jack. The other thing that you may have to do on the unit and radio on the record jack is you need to enable recording on that particular channel or talk group, or you won't hear it through the record jack. So that's a cool thing about it, is you can have certain channels that you don't have streaming to your Bluetooth speaker. Maybe you want certain channels to be coming through and the other channels that you don't. So you can certainly set that up as well. But Bluetooth is definitely a cool way to be able to do that. An awesome question by that, what was it? Yes, one of you guys mentioned it. But yeah, definitely a really good thing to be able to do there. When is there new firmware coming out for the SDSs? I believe there's new firmware coming out. I don't know when it'll be available, but eventually there's going to be some new firmware. There's still stuff on those radios, such as jacks, that are still not known of its usage. So I'm pretty certain that Uniden is not done with things. Of course, we had COVID, and then we had, various things, that kind of hiccuped, basically, creating new radios or manufacturing new or even doing new firmware. Be patient. I bet that Uniden is in the process of doing some firmware updates. Maybe some cool features will come out of it. I mean, the great thing about the SDS is they're software-driven radios. So you can write firmware for it and make it so it does, something new. So be patient. I think, Uniden's going to have some stuff coming through the pipeline that's going to be great for the hobby. We just have to wait and see. Any other questions? Les, thank you for watching each and every week. We appreciate you watching both the Train Aficionado and Scanner Guys show. And I believe Dale, he's in Nashville for a conference, so he's not in the audience, or if he is in the audience, he's being pretty quiet. But he is definitely at a conference out in Nashville, which is pretty cool. I think that's going to wrap it up for tonight's show. I'm going to do a couple of slides. We'll come back if you guys have some additional questions, but I think we got them all. So let me go back to the slide deck. And tonight's presentation, we were talking about tips for faster scanning. So hopefully you kind of got your creative juices flowing to kind of think outside the box and think of, this would be something I should try on my scanner. So hopefully you come out of the show with something that you may want to try or may be able to tweak your programming. So as always, we want to always thank you. The Scanner Guys are brought to you by viewers like you. You shop our merch store at scannerguys.com. That helps us to be able to pay for the streaming service, the web hosting, and any of the cool things that we have for in here in our studio, such as our microphone, our stream deck, and even the software that we present the show each and every week. We appreciate that for both Scanner Guys and Train Aficionado. We want to remind you, if you're in the market for any scanner accessories or products or even software, make sure you check out ScannerMaster. ScannerMaster.com. There's an affiliate link down in this video. Press that affiliate link and then it'll take you right to the website, and then check out through the website, and that'll be able to help us as well. We get a small little portion of the sale, which helps us as well. So we greatly appreciate that. And as always, follow, like, and subscribe to the social media on the channel as well. Train Aficionado Live will be back next Wednesday, August the 16th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. The last show, we talked about the new radios from a rail fan's point of view, the BCD 160DN and the BCD 260DN. So everything a railfan needs to know about the newest and latest and greatest releases from Uniden. As I mentioned on the show, we don't have an ETA when it's going to be released. I'm told it's several months away. And as for pricing, we don't know that as of yet. Also this fall, we're going to have some events coming up. A couple of virtual events. And then, of course, some local events right here in Cincinnati for some scanner classes. Yes, I said virtual. We're going to take an attempt at trying to do some virtual events. So definitely be on the lookout for that as well. And, of course, some in-person events on the, in the Cincinnati area. So if you're in the area, definitely keep an eye on Train Aficionado, the events page. And then, of course, follow our social media as well, because Train Aficionado will be promoting those as well. As a reminder, and I can't say it enough, make sure you follow, like, and subscribe to Scanner Guys, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. Since you're right here on the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications, and definitely, if you like what you've seen tonight, give this video a thumbs up, and if you're watching it after broadcast, certainly put your comments in the comment section below the video. As we have here during the live show, we have our live chat, which I try to interact with you guys as much as possible and answer your questions. While you're cruising the internet, make sure you check out the Scanner Guys website, thescannerguyshow.com. You can shop the swag store. You can sign up for our newsletter. And, of course, you can drop us an email as well through the website. Well, this was this evening's topic of discussion, tips for faster scanning. Hopefully you walk away from this with some more knowledge and kind of making you think about some things that you can do with your radio. We greatly appreciate every single one of you that has joined us, and thank you so much for some of those suggestions for some upcoming shows. Keep those coming. I'm looking to be able to do more shows, with your suggestions. So definitely be on the lookout for that soon with some of the suggestions we had tonight. And as always, be safe out there. We'll definitely catch you again next week on Train Aficionado Live. And then, of course, we still have another Scanner Guys show, which is coming up in a couple of weeks on Wednesday, the 23rd. So definitely tune in for that as well. Thanks again for everybody that joined us. Have a great evening. I'm Jonathan Higgins, live from our Cincinnati studio. Be safe. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.